The church, they tell us, is in crisis. Numbers are dropping, average ages are rising, churches seem less relevant than in any other time in the last 500 years. In New Zealand and Australia in 1961, 40% of all people claimed to attend church at least once a month. By 1980 that was down to 24%, by 1999 down to 20%. In Britain over the same period, church attendance declined from 18% to 7.5%. Even in America it's dropped from nearly 50% to just on 40%. So what's happening? Some individual churches point to an explosive growth in numbers, but a US survey revealed that more than 80% is what they term transfer growth, people playing musical chairs with their church attendance. The fact is, the younger you are, the less likely you are to go to church. This graph of church attendance in the US shows the breakdown of the population into the 4 generation groups. The blue section shows the proportion of each generation which goes to church, and it's shrinking as each generation comes along. So what do these figures mean? Australian author and speaker Michael McQueen is the founder of a training consultancy called the Next Gen Group. He's made a study of the rest of us.
411 BC was when Socrates came out saying that the youth of his day were all disrespectful and impatient and basically not up to par. There's a song, Bye Bye Birdie, the old musical, what's wrong with the kids of today? And this is a perennial question. We tend to always look at the young people and say, their attitude's wrong or it's inappropriate, they need to toughen up. When we were their age, we did X, Y and Z. But the reality is every generation's a function of the era they've grown up in, and Gen Y have grown up in a very different age, very, very different. And so that their attitudes and expectations reflect that.
So who are these groups? According to the last census in New Zealand, the figures stack up like this. Builders are people over the age of 64. They've lived through world wars. They have a hard-working, dutiful and frugal outlook on life. Baby boomers are between the ages of 45 and 64. They're seen as optimistic, assertive, afraid of ageing. Generation X and Y aren't differentiated in the census, but they're between their mid-teens and 44. Generation X is easily bored, addicted to change, with a pragmatic attitude to life, valuing friendship often more than family. Generation Y is a response to Generation X. They've been told since they were born how great they are, and there's an emphasis on rights over responsibilities. They are 4 very different groups, and the church doesn't seem to have noticed, with many of its systems and organisations tailored to the smallest group, those over the age of 64. Michael McQueen again.
Some churches are very proactive in understanding what's happening with young people and understanding what sort of things different generations are looking for in church. Some generations it's all about community. I want to be involved in a community where I feel loved and a part of a group of people that I'm responsible to and responsible for. Others go to church because it's a social outing, or others go because it's teaching. And different generations want different things. And some churches that are attracting Gen Y are doing so by really appealing to this postmodern worldview which says that truth isn't absolute. And so rather than teaching doctrine necessarily, they're about the pastors or the ministers sharing their experiences of faith, their experiences of God. And for a postmodern group, that's what works. And so those churches are often seeing a great result with Gen Y.
It's hard for churches though, isn't it? Because there is right and there is wrong. There is a line between them, and they must feel that this line's being blurred.
I think you can actually communicate with a postmodern generation without necessarily lowering your standards or saying that everything's fair game. There is a role for boundaries with this group, and they actually want it. They want boundaries. They want someone to stand up and go, this is the way to live life effectively. They crave that truth. It's like a breath of fresh air in a world that says, figure it out for yourself. But it's the way it's communicated. And rather than saying you should or you must or this is what I urge you to do, it's actually about sharing your experience and allowing them to make the connection for themselves.
But as the church struggles to come to terms with communicating its message to a postmodern society, it has to grapple with something that's completely new. Unlike any other time in history, the public are connected through media, not just the instant fix of television and radio, but constant access to information through the internet, constant interaction with Facebook and Twitter, constant community discussion, as there's always someone online to talk to. Like never before, there never needs to be a dull moment.
There's a huge challenge from a church context for a local church pastor who typically now has to compete with the podcasts and the videos that their parishioners are watching from some of the world's leading preachers, and then on a Sunday evening they're expected to preach at a similar level, and yet in some cases the itinerant preachers that young people are hooking into, learning from, that's all they do is travel and preach. But the local pastor's got to be involved in pastoral work, and so there is a lot of pressure on churches because of the access that this group have to information.
But Michael McQueen says the church has a secret weapon up its collective sleeve. The methods that Jesus used to teach people are as valid today as they ever were.
The most effective way for generations to connect is to tell stories to each other, because narrative from the earliest age is that foundational building block of learning. We learn the best through fairy tales and stories and narrative, and so in communicating with this group, it's what Jesus did, and it's what works best. And certainly with a postmodern group, a story puts a truth in the context of experience, and that's what works.
It's a challenge, and not an easy one when you look at those declining attendances at church, but it's a challenge the church must come to terms with.